There's a famous quote attributed to Bruce Lee. At least I think it's, I didn't hear him say this, but it's attributed to him. So sweet. And the quote goes like this. I'm paraphrasing, but he wasn't afraid of the man who'd practiced 1,000 kicks one time. He was more afraid of the man who practiced one kick 1,000 times. Philosophically, that applies to guns as well. Let's talk about that today. Why it's more important to have one or two firearms in your stable that you're really, really familiar with than dozens and dozens of firearms that you never really use. Why it might be a good idea to stop buying guns until you watch this video. Just walked all into a spider web. See me jump up and freak out, it's because there's a spider crawling on me somewhere, and that's just how it goes. There's a very real phenomenon in the gun world today, in the gun community, what you would kind of attribute to decision paralysis or analysis paralysis. It's the kind of collection fetish. And I found myself doing this as well, where you just get so focused on collecting more and more and more firearms of different type and style and variety, just because it's fun, right? I mean, it's really fun to collect stuff. It's fun to, try out different types of guns and play with different types of guns and all that good stuff. There's all kinds of fun things out there we can do in the gun community. But it can lead to, I think, some bad habits when it comes to just firearms proficiency. If you're always chasing the next new gun, the next new style or accessory or this, that, or the other, you kind of miss out on the opportunities, and especially calibers, like chasing calibers and stuff like that can be really bad. Now, I chase a lot of calibers for the channel, for video purposes and for analysis purposes and stuff like that, but when you're chasing all those things, you can miss out on the opportunities to really focus your training in on one specific firearm or one set of firearms. Let's say you have a toolbox and you have like 3 different tools in that toolbox that fit 3 different roles. You have, say, a bolt action, a semi-automatic rifle, and then a pistol. And if you can focus yourself on practicing with those more than you do on buying new stuff, buying new guns and new accessories and stuff like that, you might find yourself to be a more effective actual rifleman, and more effective with self-defense and stuff like that than filling up your safe with a bunch of stuff you never use. And the crux of the philosophy is this, based on Bruce Lee's quote, and I'm pretty sure it was a Bruce Lee quote, about the man who's practiced one kick 1,000 times. And you see this in martial arts a lot. There's fighters like Bruce Lee and Superfoot Bill Wallace and guys like that they really only had a few tools in their toolbox that they used regularly. That didn't mean they didn't know all these other things and they didn't have all these other techniques down and stuff like that, but they distilled their fighting style down to a very small handful of moves and counters and blocks and all those things and strikes that they got really proficient with and that they could execute time and time again. There's a new fighter that I was watching the other day. It's a female in Japan, and she's a kickboxer, and I can't remember her name. I think her name's Chimera. I'm probably going to butcher that, but she has this side kick that she does, and basically she just leaves her leg up in the air, or is regularly pulling her leg up in the air and just side kicking and side kicking and side kicking. It's ridiculous. Like, nobody can land a punch on this girl and hit on her without catching that foot in their face, and she can execute the kick not just one direction, but she can move it around within the aperture of that style of kick and strike from multiple different zones, but using the same basic movement to get all of her strikes in. Now, she's a fantastic striker when it comes to fists and stuff as well. And Bruce Lee did a lot the same thing. He had this side kick he would do with his foot, basically a heel kick, more or less, and he could just land the thing over and over and over again wherever he wanted. And it was very hard to defend against. So the same philosophy, I think, applies to firearms proficiency. We have the luxury today of in America at least, of kind of excess of income in a lot of ways, and kind of a consumer mindset culture where we just like consume as much as we can instead of buying new ammo for one rifle, like picking one rifle. It doesn't have to be anything fancy either. It can be a basic old school style semi-auto like this. And just with a common caliber, 308, there's nothing, this isn't a fancy caliber right here that I have in front of me. It's not one of the new Gucci ones. But if you can take something like this and kind of put aside that consumerist mindset of getting more and more different types of firearms and just take something simple like this, even if it's just what you can get your hands on, but you practice with it relentlessly, and you shoot it and you shoot it and you shoot it and you reload it and you practice drills with it, and you go to the range and you practice with your optics and you practice at different ranges, you practice standing, kneeling, different positions, all those things. As a rifleman, as a shooter, and the same thing applies to a shotgun or to a deer rifle, if you're just using a deer rifle or if you're using a pistol, that kind of thing. As a shooter, I think you're going to be a much more proficient and capable shooter in any scenario you may find yourself kind of confronted with, whether it's self-defense, whether it's home defense, or kind of combat applications, or even like practice, like for or not practice, but competition. That's the one. So if you think about the guys who run competition and shoot competition disciplines, whether it's Steel Challenge, USPSA, PRS, those kind of things, they don't find success in continually trying new loads or trying new calibers or trying new guns or trying new styles or they distill it all down into something, a setup and a style and caliber and load that works for them and their purpose and use, and then they just practice with it relentlessly, consistently. It's the basics. It's mastering the basics. Another conversation I had in passing with somebody who was in a top tier military unit, somebody with a lot of experience, a friend of mine, and after watching some of their other talks and stuff like that, the information or the relay that I got out of the conversations I've had with this person, or watched their him and others like him who were in these top tier military units, the difference between a standard infantry troop, your basic airborne guy, or your basic not ranger, but your basic like infantry guy or whatever, the difference between them and these top tier guys is not access to this plethora of Gucci gear, which they do have. They have a lot better gear in a lot of ways in those type of units, but they have simple gear that works, simple tool sets that work for their environment and for their need, as far as their combative need or whatever, and they master the basics. They don't continually just try different guns to see what fits the mission profile better or whatever, what yada yada. They take the basics that they have, the basic firearms, their toolbox, and then they master the basics in those disciplines, and they become so ingrained in them, so completely in tune with their reflexes and with their mindsets, that it becomes second nature. It becomes like breathing. So the more you practice something, the more like breathing, the more natural it feels to you, and the better and more proficient, unless you have to think about it when it comes to a combat scenario. I was also having this conversation, and I'll parallel this with the martial arts a lot, because my sons have been getting into it a lot lately. It's something I've delved into in the past, and I've kind of jumped back into it myself. But I was having this conversation with Hanshi the other day, the sensei of our dojo, our grandmaster, and we were talking about the combination of hits and kicks and strikes and blocks and all that stuff becoming second nature through practice of the basics, versus a new fighter that's trying to figure out what to do when they're in a sparring session. They're like, okay, what do I do with, maybe this, or maybe, this or something, and they're trying to figure it out. When you're in a pressure testing situation like that in sparring, you can tell the difference in somebody who hasn't mastered the basics yet, who doesn't understand the basics yet, and you're going to default to the lowest level of your training. So somebody who has no experience whatsoever, a white belt coming in there, they're going to be like, I don't know, do something, But if you compare that to somebody like a black belt or a brown belt, or somebody who is further along in their journey, and they've just practiced the basics over and over and over again, but they've built kind of a layer of tool sets of the basics within their fighting and style and their profile of their ability. It's a lot easier for them in sparring sessions to call upon those things. You can recall the muscle memory without having to put too much thought into it, without pausing, without hesitating, without all those things. And the same thing goes with when it comes to firearms proficiency, and it's not just in a self-defense scenario, like getting your pistol out and getting on target and putting the round down range, or getting your rifle engaged, engaging a target and sweeping and finding targets with your red dot or whatever. It happens, it's relevant to hunting as well. When you're out in the bush and you're bebopping along and something comes up in front of you quickly that you weren't really expecting, and it's a viable animal to shoot for your tag or whatever, and you want to get your rifle up and get on target and engage that thing in an effective way. If you have your basics mastered and you're not fumbling with your gear, and you're not fumbling with, oh, I put this new accessory on scope on here, do I have my magazines, where's my magazines, where do I, that's kind of the point. Is like, the more complex and the more options you give yourself, the more you're going to induce analysis paralysis. So breaking things down into the basics and the simple things, and kind of codifying your process for your firearm and the way you engage it is super, super important to eliminating the complexities and eliminating the variables whenever it comes to stressful or high impact situations, or when it comes to important situations, like whether you're in a sparring match, or you're in a street fight, or you're in a defense test, or you're in a home invasion scenario, or you're out and about with the family on a Sunday afternoon doing whatever, and somebody decides to do something stupid in public and you have to engage your firearm or whatever, like that. Those are scenarios that most people will never find themselves in. But if you do, I think it's more valuable to have distilled your information and your practice down to a few small basics, and then master those things, and then build on those as you can, as it becomes muscle memory. I've been having this conversation with my sons a lot lately, because they're just now getting into karate, martial arts, for the first time. They're white belts and stuff like that. Well, they're working their way up to orange belts. They'll both be orange belts by the end of the week, actually. So they progressed really well, but they were struggling with sparring at the beginning. You know what I mean? And especially when sparring somebody like my size or bigger or something like that, somebody with more skill and more discipline and more experience. And I sat them down the other day and say, look, if you take one block, one punch, and one kick, and you can practice those, and you can practice them proficiently from different angles and from different different scenarios or whatever, but just try to get that block, that kick, or that strike, or employ blocking basics in a way that is simple for you, you can actually be really effective in sparring. And so I kind of showed them some things, and the senseis have showed them some things, and they've then employed those in the next sparring session they went into. I was like, just try to hit this strike, just this strike, or this style of block, or this kick. Get this kick in there, practice this one kick. And it really, really, really helped them kind of flower into a new level of confidence with their ability to engage somebody in a sparring session. And the same thing applies to firearms. The more you practice with a specific firearm, a specific load, a specific optic setup, an accessory setup, and a deployment scenario, so a deployment style, how do you get to your weapon, how do you get it out, how do you get it on target, the more efficient you're going to be if something does happen or something does go down and you need to employ that weapon. You don't need 1,000 different guns, and you don't need 1,000 different techniques to be an effective fighter, to be an effective rifleman, to be an effective hunter, to be an effective target shooter or whatever. You just need to distill it down to the basics and practice and master the basics. So this is the last karate reference I'll use, because it's really a big part of the conversation around our house these days, and a lot of the world that we're learning in reference to karate, and how to produce and develop a kata for yourself. And a kata is a series of formalized movements to get you to an end goal, and practice whatever. But the difference between white belts and black belts is not that they are just better fighters. The black belts aren't, because they're usually more polished and all that. But once you get to that black belt level, you've actually mastered the basics. You're considered to be somebody who has mastered enough of the basics to begin your journey as a martial artist. And that's the way our dojo teaches. That's the way we look at it in life. It's like, the black belt's not the end goal. It's the beginning goal. It's the get to that point so that you've mastered the basics, and now you can really start to flourish and grow and make it your own, and learn how to teach others as well, if that makes sense. So if you find yourself with that decision and analysis paralysis, you're kind of locked down and looking in your safe, and you're like, man, I've got so much stuff going on in here, which I've done recently. I've actually started paring down my safe. Like, okay, I don't use this one. I don't need it. I don't need it for channel content or anything anymore. Some of them I'll set aside for that, and like, you know, this is channel content stuff. That's because I'm a content creator. But otherwise, I'm like, well, what are the ones I actually like to use the most? What's the style of firearm that I like to use the most? It's the most well suited for any specific given task that I have for it, and I enjoy the most. Like, what do I like? So I'm going to take that and just start to use that. And instead of chasing 1,000 different loads for that firearm, like, what do I have to make 3 good loads? What's a good target load? What's a good plinking load? And what's a good hunting load for that firearm? So I'm going to build a bunch of those. I'm going to practice with them. Practice them in different ranges, different environments, different, atmospheric conditions and stuff like that. Bad weather, good weather, cold weather, hot weather. Practice with that firearm. Practice kneeling, standing, prone, all those things to just get more proficient as a rifleman and start to really master the basics with 1 or 2 tools in my toolbox versus chasing a bunch of different things. So if you find yourself, you're caught in that gun fetish loop, I challenge you to do this. Find yourself, or distill your catalog down to 1 or 2 firearms. Say, pick 2 categories, say rifle and pistol. 2 good firearms. And get your magazines loaded, get your bullets for them, and just practice with those. Can you do it for 6 months? Do you think you could do it for just 6 months? For 6 months, just take 1 set of firearms, like 1 pistol, 1 rifle, and practice with those. I bet you'll be surprised to find how well you progress as a shooter, with accuracy, with precision, and with speed, and with confidence if you did something like that. All right, thank y'all for sticking around. That's all I got for today. If you like this video, like, subscribe, comment, and share. Thank you for joining me again. Don't forget to keep your knives sharp, keep your powder dry, and keep your magazines loaded. And don't get me wrong, you can never really have too many guns. I like to have a lot of guns. And I believe it's your right to have a lot of guns. You should have a lot of guns. All I'm saying is, maybe pick 1 or 2 and practice with them a lot. Like your primaries that you're really good at. And if they happen to be similar to most of the other firearms you have, well, then there's a lot of cross-platform compatibility there, isn't there? Ooh, which reminds me, gun store's about to open.